If you're looking for a plant-based main course for your holiday table, you're gonna love this. I'm baking a rustic savory pie filled with hearty wild rice, lentils, squash, mushrooms, shallots, cranberries, and walnuts, then decorating the outside with handmade dough leaves. Stick around and I'll walk you through the recipe and how to create the fall foliage look that makes this dish unforgettable. Hello friends, Stephanie here. My savory harvest galette is festive, gorgeous, and super delicious. It works great as a holiday main course, but it's also fantastic as a side dish for a larger group. Let me show you how I make it, and then as usual, you can head to my blog for step-by-step detailed instructions, and you can also download a printable copy of the recipe there too. We'll divide this savory harvest galette recipe into steps, which you can accomplish all at once, or you can break it up across 2 or even 3 days leading up to your special dinner to make it easier if you prefer. First, we'll put together the wild rice, lentil, and squash filling. Then we'll make the galette dough. And finally, we'll assemble the galette, decorate it with dough leaves, and bake it. So let's get started. On the stove behind me, in 2 separate pots, I'm cooking a wild rice blend and some French green lentils. They need to stay in 2 separate pots because the wild rice blend takes about 40 minutes to cook, whereas the lentils take only about 15 minutes. I'm also going to roast some butternut squash. Now you can buy this already cubed, which is convenient, but even with that, I will chop the cubes into much smaller pieces just because it's easier to incorporate the squash throughout the filling when the pieces are smaller like this. So I've preheated the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've lined a baking sheet with parchment paper. I've got the butternut squash in a mixing bowl, and this step is entirely optional, but I highly recommend drizzling the squash with just a teaspoon of blackstrap molasses. You don't really even need to measure it, just drizzle a little bit in there. Stir it in until the butternut is lightly coated in molasses. This will help it to caramelize while it roasts in the oven. Then transfer the squash to your prepared baking sheet. Spread it out in a single layer evenly over the pan. Sprinkle it lightly with some salt. And then slide it into the oven. The squash will roast in the oven for about 30 minutes, but I will pull them out at the 20-minute mark to flip them around with a spatula just to help them roast evenly. While those components cook, I'll begin caramelizing the shallots. Normally, I prefer to use a vegetable broth for my sauté rather than oil, but since this is more of a special occasion recipe, I will rely on just a little bit of avocado oil to help me caramelize the shallots. However, if you are living an entirely oil-free lifestyle, you can absolutely use a vegetable broth for this instead. So I'll heat just a teaspoon of avocado oil in a frying pan and add my sliced shallots. Sprinkle them with just a little bit of salt, and then stir these around to coat them in the oil and the salt. Give the pan a quick shake just to spread the shallots out across the pan evenly, and we'll let these cook, stirring occasionally until they become soft and browning. Once the shallots are nicely golden, I'll remove these from the pan because I want to reuse it to sauté my mushrooms. I'll heat about 3 tablespoons of vegetable broth in the frying pan, just till it's warm. And then I'll add my diced crimini mushrooms. I'll give these a stir. Sprinkle them with a little bit of salt. And let these cook until they begin to soften. As the muffins begin to release some of their moisture, I'll add the minced garlic, the fresh rosemary, and the fresh thyme leaves. These herbs will really lend some traditional holiday flavor to the dish. The aroma is amazing. Now we'll combine all the filling ingredients in a mixing bowl. So bring together the cooked wild rice, the cooked French lentils, the roasted butternut squash, the sautéed mushrooms, and the caramelized shallots. Then we'll stir these together and drizzle the mixture with some balsamic vinegar. Now, if you're able to find a fig-sweetened balsamic vinegar, that would be amazing. That's my recommendation, but any balsamic vinegar will do. Just a drizzle, because this can be a very strong flavor and we don't want to overpower the flavors of the rest of the ingredients. But you can add it to taste, and we'll stir that in evenly. Now we'll add our stir-ins, some sweetened dried cranberries and some chopped walnuts. And we'll fold those into the mixture too. And the filling is all ready to go. Now, if you're splitting this recipe up over a couple of days, then you can transfer this to an airtight food storage container and keep it in the fridge until you're ready for it. But if you're doing this all in one day, then you can just set this aside for now. Step 2 is to make the dough for our galette crust. This recipe contains an ingredient that might surprise you. It's a plant-based, plain unsweetened Greek yogurt. It really adds a delicious creamy element to the galette crust, and I think you're gonna love it. The dough recipe is really simple. For the dry ingredients, we have whole wheat flour, all-purpose flour, salt, and baking powder. Stir these together. Then we'll add the plant-based Greek yogurt and a quarter cup of the liquid from a can of chickpeas, otherwise known as aquafaba. This will help hold the structure of the dough where traditionally a chicken's egg would be used. Stir in the yogurt and the aquafaba until the dough becomes shaggy. Once the yogurt is cut evenly into the dough, then we'll add some water. Start with half a cup and stir it in until an even dough begins to form. You can continue adding water about a tablespoon or two at a time as needed until the dough starts to come together in a more or less cohesive ball. Once the dough ball has picked up all of the loose flour in the bowl, then you're ready to knead. This would be a great time to remove your jewelry and pull your hair back because we're about to roll up our sleeves and really get in there. So it might be helpful to sprinkle it with a little bit of extra flour, maybe even get some flour on your hands and start to press the dough into the bottom of the bowl and keep working at it, spinning it and smushing it in a kneading motion until the dough looks smooth on the surface. And when it's ready, it'll look a little bit like this. Now this is another great stopping point, so if you're going to do the rest of the recipe tomorrow, you can just put this in a bowl, cover it with plastic wrap, and stick it in the fridge until you're ready for it. The final step of this recipe is to assemble the rustic galette. But first, if you want to be really extra and add the finishing touch of the little decorative dough leaves all around the crust, here's what we'll do. Cut off about a quarter of the ball of dough. Then keep the rest covered so it won't dry out. Lay some parchment paper on your work surface, and I've actually taped together 2 pieces to make a larger surface. Sprinkle it very lightly with flour. Then press your small portion of dough into as thin of a disc as possible. Then once you've made it pretty thin with your hands, you can place it on your floured surface and press it out even further if you'd like, and finally use a rolling pin to get it to about 1/8 of an inch thick. Now the shape of this piece of dough doesn't matter very much, but this is the part we'll use to cut out our leaf shapes. And now use leaf-shaped cookie cutters to cut the dough into these pretty little leaves. Bonus points if your cookie cutters have stamps on the top like mine do. You can pick these up on Amazon, and I'll drop a link to those below in the description. I always try to maximize my use of the space to get as many leaf stamps as possible in one go. This part is really fun. Once the dough is cut into leaf shapes, you can press down each plunger to make impressions in the top surface of your leaves and pull away the cutouts. And the stamps serve a double purpose of helping release the dough leaves from the cutter. So pretty. So pretty. As you pull away the extra dough, keep it together in a little pile on the side, because then we can use all of it, roll it out again, and make more cutouts. Once you've gotten all the leaves you think you possibly can out of your small portion of dough, you can use up the rest by just making tiny little balls by rolling them in your hands to represent berries that we can place just between the leaves on the galette crust. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Place all of your leaf cutouts and little berries on a plate, and you can reuse the plastic wrap you had covering the rest of your dough to keep these from drying out. We'll just set these aside for a moment. Now, this would be a great time to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit if it's not still hot. Lightly reflour your work surface and maybe the dough and also your hands. And press out the remaining dough into as large a disc as you can. First with your hands, just like the other portion of dough, and eventually with the rolling pin. And we'll roll this dough out until it's about 1/4 of an inch thick, and we'll try to keep it roughly in the shape of a circle. It certainly doesn't have to be perfect, but the end result will look better if the shape is not too irregular. Okay, now if you've used 2 pieces of parchment paper for your work surface, try to slide the dough to center it on only 1 sheet of paper. It's okay if the dough extends beyond the edge because we're going to fold it in just a moment. Now gently slide your baking sheet underneath the paper. Bring out your filling and transfer it to the center of the dough in a large mound. You'll need to leave a pretty substantial margin all the way around the filling so that we can fold the dough over it. And we'll kind of press the filling into a mound to give it a firm shape. Now bring one end of the dough and fold it upward toward the center of the filling. Then neatly fold the next section and pull that up toward the center as well. And continue working all the way around until all of the dough is pulled inward to form the crust of the galette. It already looks really pretty. Let me hold this up for you so you can see it. And now for the finishing touch. Now the decoration step is optional. You can see it's already very pretty and presentable as it is. However, adding these leaves is just going to take it to the next level and make this dish truly a showstopper. We'll come back to some aquafaba, the liquid from a can of chickpeas, and take it into a bowl. And using a silicone pastry brush, I'll take each leaf one at a time and coat the back of it very thinly in some of this aquafaba. This will serve as the glue to help the dough adhere to the crust. Now we'll add a little bit of the aquafaba to the galette crust as well, right where we want to place the leaf. And then we'll just stick that on there like a sticker, close to the bottom at first. And we'll work our way around, adding more leaves and acorn and pine cone cutouts. Now we'll continue working just like this all the way around the galette until all of our leaves are used up. Once the dough leaves are lining the entire bottom of the galette, you can start to work them up the sides if you still have some left. This creates the illusion of an accumulation of fall leaves, or even as if they're growing up the sides. As a final decorative touch, you can take the berries and stick them in between the leaves wherever you see a little bit of space. Once again, we'll brush them with some aquafaba first. And then for one final decorative step, we'll take a little bit of maple syrup in a bowl, grab that brush, and brush the maple syrup over the leaves. This will cause them to brown a little bit more in the oven and make them stand out a little bit against the background crust of the galette. Okay, one last thing. I'm going to cut away the extra parchment paper so that it won't burn in the oven. Okay, and now this is ready to bake. I'm so excited to put this in the oven. The galette will bake for about 20 minutes or until the crust is firm and golden. And that's how you make this savory harvest galette. I'm so excited for you to experience how fun this is to put together and, of course, how delicious it is. I've got more holiday recipes coming to the channel very soon, so please subscribe so you won't miss them. I hope you have wonderful holidays with your loved ones. Again, I'm Stephanie of Green Sage, wishing you good health and delicious food. I'll see you again next time.